It would be nice if you could create functions where the number of arguments that are provided don't have to be defined beforehand. So for example, this function that I just created, it will only accept 2 values. If you try to feed it 3 values, it's not going to work because it's designed to take 2 values. But wouldn't it be nice if you could provide as many numbers as you want and it would go through and multiply them together? So to kind of make the use of functions and defining functions a little bit more flexible, Python has this concept of args and kwargs. So basically, args are used to provide a undefined number of inputs that don't have to have keys associated with them. So the important component here, let me just add a code chunk above here. So I'm going to create an iterable object. So I'm going to create a list. So do list1 is equal to, and we'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now if I do print list1, that's just going to return the values in the list as a list, right? Now, if I did print asterisk list1, then what that does is it returns all the values separately. So you don't get the list with the 5 elements in it, you get all the 5 values as separate elements. So this is known as like unpacking a list. So that's actually what's important here. So the args part's not important. What's important is the single asterisk. So single asterisk allows you to unpack a iterable object like a list. The double asterisk allows you to unpack a dictionary. And what's unique about a dictionary is that it has keys. So args is used generally when you have arguments that you don't want to or don't need to assign keys to, whereas kwargs is used when they do have keys assigned to them. So let's look at some of this in action. So here I've redefined my function using args. So I can provide not just 2 numbers, but as many as I want. So what this does is it initiates a variable in here called x1. It sets it equal to 1. And then it loops through all of the provided arguments. We'll talk about for loops later here, but basically it's just going to go through them one at a time, and it's just going to, in place, it's going to multiply by that. So let's have a look at what this should do. If we provide it 2 through 5, it should do initiate at 1, so do 1 times 1, so the result will be 1, and then it'll multiply 1 times 2, so 2, and then 2 times 3, so 6, and then 6 times 4, so 12, 24, and then 24 times 5, which should be, what should that be? 116, that doesn't sound right. Well, we'll see in a minute. And then note that the important thing here, again, args is just kind of the default way to state this in Python. But it doesn't really matter. What matters is the asterisks. So here I basically did the same thing, but now I'm using the term nums as opposed to args, and it still does the exact same thing. I just have to swap out in the loop args with nums. So let's just run this and see what we get. 120. Apparently I can't. That makes sense. So it'd be 125 minus 5, right? So 120. So anyway, what this is doing is it's basically treating this as a list of values or tuple values, and it iterates over each of them and does the calculation. And again, the goal here is that now we can provide a different number of variables. So I could go in here and add as many values as I want. Is not limited to 2. Okay, and then this example demonstrates kwargs, which again is like args, but it's used to unpack now a dictionary as opposed to an iterable object. So again, the kwargs doesn't matter. What matters is the double asterisk here. One thing that is a little different is when we define our function now, instead of just saying like for a in kwargs, we do for a in kwargs dot values. And this dot values, which is a method applied to a dictionary, allows you to extract the values from a dictionary. So we don't want the keys, we want the values. This allows you to get the values as opposed to the keys. But other than that, it works its way through. And here you can see the difference is now we're able to provide value key pairs a different number of value key pairs if we want, right? So same result, but now we have keys associated with everything. So if I did something like, we could add in 6, right? And get it that result. If something doesn't have a key, it probably will fail. Let's see what it does. Yeah, so positional argument follows keyword argument. So we'll explain in a minute why that matters. Okay, and then again, kwargs doesn't matter. That's just kind of the default term people used. You can use anything. The key here is that you're using 2 asterisks to unpack a dictionary. And then obviously this dot value method to grab the values as opposed to the keys. Okay, and this just shows you that. I already did this, unpacking an iterable, right? So let's say, for example, you want it for maximum flexibility. You want to be able to include both arguments that don't have keys associated and arguments that do have keys associated, and then also maybe some default values or some included arguments. So here I basically have A and B defined as variables. Then this can also accept some args, so it's going to be values without keys associated, and then some kwargs. When you do this, you're supposed to put the args before the kwargs, and the same thing when you actually call it down here. So what's going on is we initiate this variable as 1, then we multiply it by whatever A is, then we multiply it by whatever B is, then we work through all the args that are provided, and then we work through all the kwargs that are provided, and eventually return the result. So let's run that and see what we get. So we end up with 72. Again, if I try to do something like this, I said 5 to the end, I believe that'll fail. Yeah, because it says positional argument follows keyword arguments. So what we would need to do is put the positional arguments, or the ones that don't have keys, first. So I'm going to put in here 5 and 6 and 7, and then the new arguments that have keys associated. So that worked. But again, if we would move these to the end, it shouldn't work. Oops. Again, 4, 6, 7. It'll give us that same error. Okay, so anyway, that provides some functionality. What I find a lot of times is that I don't do this a lot, but I use functions or methods that other people generate that use this, so it's good to understand what they mean. So again, in summary, args indicates that you can provide a set of values that in which the number of values that you're providing don't have to be defined beforehand, and they don't have to have keys associated with them. Kwargs is the same, except they can have keys associated with them. When you use both args and kwargs in the same function definition, then you want to put the positional arguments, like the args, first, and then the kwargs second.